Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second webinar, How to Find Your Perfect College. Again, my name is Lauren Fang. I'm a rising sophomore at Georgetown University, and I plan on majoring in Justice and Peace Studies and Women and Gender Studies. Do you guys want to introduce yourself?
I'm George Matushko. I'm a rising sophomore at UCLA, and I want to major in astrobiology.
And hi, I'm Xiaomian. I will be entering Stanford this fall, and I'm currently undeclared but interested in engineering.
And together we make up the Branham Alumni Network, which is a partnership with Bruin de Bruin Tutoring Club. And just before we get started, I wanted to issue a disclaimer. Our title is called How to Find Your Perfect College. However, in reality, there's no one college that's perfect for you. There are lots and lots of different colleges that would be a perfect fit for you. And hopefully, through the tips and tricks that we're going to give you in this webinar, you'll be able to explore and research colleges in a way in which you'll be able to find those perfect fit colleges. And we already did the Kahoot. Thank you all for participating.
Yeah, so hello. Thank you everyone for coming, and we hope everyone is doing well. We want to take a weekly check-in moment to check in with ourselves in our headspace, and we also want to give a sort of weekly self-care tip as you're beginning to start the college ops process and coming to these webinars. We recommend, as you will start the year, to think about blocking out your time when you do anything, not only college apps, but also as you're starting maybe your junior, your senior year, and things are getting more stressful and you're starting AP classes. It's going to be really important for you to block out your time and avoid procrastinating. And that way you'll find it a lot easier to be happy, and you'll have a lot more time to do what you want to do versus spending all of your time cramming at the very end. And this week, after each section that we present, we're going to have a mini Q&A. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please put them publicly in the chat. You don't have to privately DM me.
And so this will be our roadmap for today's webinar. We will first look at factors to consider about a college, and then we'll be exploring colleges. The third thing we'll do is finding ways to select your college lists to apply to. And finally, we'll be sharing our stories and how we made our decisions about the colleges we are attending today. And just a disclaimer, this webinar might take more than an hour, and we will have a Q&A after each section. However, we will limit the time for each of the Q&A. So if you have questions, wait to the end, and we will answer all your questions then.
We'll answer 3 questions in the Q&As throughout the webinar, and then we'll answer like all of the questions at the end. So definitely post them in the chat, but we might not get to all of them in that specific section. And now we're going to start the first section of the webinar. This is factors to consider about a college. And before we get started, I just wanted to explain a little as to why we chose to do this particular webinar. A lot of people focus on the essay writing and test taking portion of the college applications process. However, the college selections process is also equally as important. College is more than just a school. It's a place that you're going to be living for the next 4 years. So it's really important that you find a school where you'll be surrounded by people and opportunities that will help you to learn, grow, and become the most authentic version of yourself. So in order to avoid wasting time on applications to schools that really aren't a good fit for you, and to ensure that you'll have an amazing college experience, we recommend that you take this summer to reflect on yourself and what you want out of your college experience. And so for the first section of our webinar, I'll be going over factors that George, Xiaomian, and I considered when we were researching our colleges. And the factors that I'll be talking about, many of them are on the College Scavenger Hunt activity guide that we sent out in the email and Xiaomian sent out in the group chat. So definitely open that up and make a copy of it. And if a factor that I talk about resonates with you, you can either bold it or highlight it So then when you're researching colleges, you can go back and look for colleges with that quality. And the first topic I'll be talking about is general information. First of all, you definitely want to know what type of institution you're looking at. Is it private or public? Private means that it's funded privately, and oftentimes these schools have higher tuition rates, but then they offer more financial aid. And then you also want to know if your school is co-ed or if it's a all girls or all boys school. And then lastly, whether it's a liberal arts college or a research university or both. Liberal arts means that the professors are more focused on teaching, and the education is more well-rounded, and also there's an undergraduate focus. And then a research university, one where the professors are more focused on doing research, and the students take classes that are more specific in their study of focus. And there's also a graduate program. The next factor is university size. Definitely, this is important when considering the social scene and resources that you want to have available to you. And so a small college often has a strong sense of community and more access to individual guidance from counselors and professors and stuff like that. And then at a larger school, there's often more opportunities for extracurriculars, clubs, and academic programs, and also more opportunities to meet more people. And then at a medium school, you get factors of both a small and large campus. And then also definitely consider student to faculty ratio. This is the number of faculty members per student. And sometimes this ratio is inflated because it takes into account like custodians and chefs and stuff like that. And so I usually look at class size instead, and that shows the average number of students per class. And when thinking about this one, you definitely want to consider what type of learning environment you learn the best in. Do you learn best with less or more students in your classes? And then other general information to consider: the demographics, whether it's racial, gender, or geographic, which is like where in the country or the world these students are coming from. And then also religious affiliation. Some schools are affiliated with a particular religion, and that doesn't mean that, well, anyone can attend the school, even if you're not affiliated with that religion. But definitely make sure to note how deeply affiliated the school is with that religion. And then the next category is academics. And then first to consider is majors of interest. So if you know your major, definitely make sure that major is available at that school, or you have a build your own major, like what George is saying, or what George is doing. Also, make sure that your school is specialized in the field of study that you're interested in. That means that there'll be amazing faculty and lots of resources and opportunities for you to pursue. Also, make sure that your major is part of a department. For me personally, I saw that Georgetown had a Justice and Peace major, and so I assumed that it had a department status. But actually, there's a difference between department and program. And so actually the Justice and Peace Studies major is part of a program. And so that means that oftentimes they're underfunded, they lack resources, and the faculty, they don't have tenure and often rotate. And so definitely keep that in mind. But it's totally fine if you don't know what major you're interested in. Make sure that at the school there's an option to apply undeclared, and also make sure that it's easy to switch majors if you're not sure about which major you would like to pursue. The next is research and study abroad programs. And for this, definitely check the percentage of undergraduate students involved in research and study abroad and the programs available, because that differs from school to school. Next, you're going to talk about campus life. And the weather is actually pretty important for your undergraduate experience. It's definitely fun to experience a new environment. You also don't want to be miserable during your college experience. And so in Georgetown, it's in DC, and so the summers are super hot and humid, and the winters are super dry and cold. So make sure that whatever environment that you're going to, that you'll be able to withstand it. And the next is location. Checking to see if the school is in a rural, suburban, or urban environment, and there's different opportunities that you can have in each of those spaces. Also, make sure to check what sort of things you can do off campus, because you definitely don't want to spend all your time on campus. You want to have fun in the outside environment as well. So checking what sort of restaurants are available, or like museums or theater opportunities, whatever you're interested in, make sure that you can do that off campus. And then checking the safety of the location and also the distance from home, and making sure that you're emotionally ready and you have the finances to be able to afford plane tickets home and stuff like that. The third is extracurriculars, making sure that there are athletic opportunities or student organizations that match your interests. And this will make sure that you'll find friends in a community on campus that really resonates with you. And then now we're going to talk about financial aid. There are definitely a lot of costs associated with college. Usually people just look at tuition and room and board. There are a lot of additional factors that aren't covered in those two factors. The books and supplies, those can be costly. Also transportation and plane rides home, like I was talking about before. Housing, sometimes you're locked into 4 years of housing at that school, and other times you're not guaranteed housing, so then you can go live off campus, which can be cheaper sometimes, so keep that in mind. Then also meal plans. Next, we're going to talk about merit scholarships. These are given out based on talent and abilities, so like academic, athletic, artistic, stuff like that. And it's not available at all schools. A lot of the more competitive ones don't offer merit scholarships, so see if that's an option for you. Also, there are some schools that are need aware and some schools that are need blind. Need blind means that the school doesn't take into account a person's financial situation, and then need aware means that they do take into account a person's financial situation. And this is during the application process. And typically, this depends on the size of the school's endowment. So if the school's getting a lot of donations from alumni, then they have more room to hand out financial aid to students. And then other times they have a smaller endowment, so they have to be more selective of the students that they're bringing in. And in both cases, need aware and need blind schools, there are some that don't meet all of your financial needs. So check to see what type of school it is in that regard. And this is the last category, application information. Definitely know when the application deadlines are. There's something called early decision and action, and that means that you're applying in November as opposed to January when most people apply. And it's good in that you can know your decision early and not have to worry about it later on. But at the same time, you only want to apply to school early action or early decision if you're really sure that you want to go to that school and you have enough time and you're not rushing your application. Early decision means that it's a binding agreement. So if you apply early decision and get admitted, you have to go to that school. And then early action means that it's non-binding. So if you apply to that school early action, get in, you can choose to go to another school. And then restrictive early action, that is also non-binding, but you can only apply to one school early. And yeah. And then the regular decision date is just the standard application date, which is usually in January. But then for the UCs, it's in November. So just check the application date. And then test scores is also important. With COVID, a lot of schools or not a lot, but some schools are switching to test blind, which means that they're not accepting any SAT or ACT scores. Or they're switching to test optional, which means that you can submit your ACT and SAT scores if you want, but it's not required. You should also check the general score range of that school. So what's the general SAT or ACT scores that students are getting to be admitted? However, definitely don't limit yourself. If you love a school and your score is below their score range, definitely apply. SAT and ACT is not the only thing that they're looking for in an application. It's just one factor. And then subject tests. We talked about this a little bit in the last webinar. The subject tests are SAT tests, but they're just focused on one subject as opposed to lots of different ones. And some schools either recommend or require a certain number of subject tests or a certain subject of subject tests. So check to see what the requirements are for that. And lastly, for my artists and musicians out there, if you want to supplement your application because you feel like you can't portray your talent in your essays, then you can submit an art or music portfolio to the school, and those also have deadlines. And now we're gonna go to the Q&A section. So I'll check the chat.
Oh, so there was a question about need-based versus need-blind, and the question was, this is for admissions, not what money they might give you, correct? And yes, need-aware is when they take account into your financial capabilities when they're looking at your application, and this usually applies to international students. So most private schools and public schools, I believe, are need blind if you are a US student or you immigrated here and are attending school here.
But even if they're need aware, that doesn't mean you won't get in because like you might not have all the money to go to that school. It just means that they will take into account how much money they're going to be giving you or like what scholarships you might need. So don't worry, like there are a lot of ways to get the money to be able to go to a certain school. So you can think about it later on when you're applying for financial aid and scholarships. The university won't reject you just because you don't have that much money.
Oh, and also on that note, with early decision, since that's a binding agreement, it often doesn't let you compare financial packages. Tommy wanted me to note that. So if you're interested in financial aid, early decision might not be the thing for you.
And our second question is, if a college is test optional, is it better to have taken the SAT or ACT? And currently, from what we are looking at from test prep institutions and other college board explanation, yes, if you're doing if a college is test optional, if you've taken the SAT or ACT, yes, it does boost your application because other applicants won't be looking at your other applicants won't have an SAT or ACT. However, if you're taking it, make sure that you have the time to, and considering how COVID-19 is going on right now, we are not sure if test centers will be open this fall or winter.
And if you have more questions on that topic, our next webinar will be on SAT and ACT, so definitely come to that.
And then our third question is, would it be good to take the SAT during these times since some schools have made SAT optional in college applications?
I feel like we covered that in the first question.
Depends on your circumstances, but.
And then once again, if a school's SAT blind, you don't have to worry about it at all. Like you won't write down your SAT score at all. And that applies to a lot of CSEs.
Yeah, if you haven't taken the SAT or have not reviewed it and you are an incoming senior, probably taking it right now, studying for it right now is not a good idea since you'll be looking at college applications. However, if you're a sophomore, a rising sophomore or rising junior, maybe that's a good idea because you're currently at home and it's a good time to study for the SAT. And test optional, the enforcement of test optional, I think is only for the class of 2025. So for years in the future, like if you're a class of 2026 and 27, then colleges might revert back to test required.
Yeah. And also I wanted to note that Xiaomian sent out the link for a guide to college research. And I think in that one, it lists even more factors if you would like a more in-depth list.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. And you can still ask questions about this section of the webinar, but I think we're going to move on and we'll answer those at the end.
So now I will be going over how to explore colleges. Okay. So okay. Before we go on, I just want to emphasize that about the importance of researching colleges. You will be spending 4 years at this college of your choice, and more important than that, you want to be able to make good comparisons between the colleges that you're accepted in order to pick the college that fits you. On the more concrete side right now, colleges often ask you to write a why college essay, which is where you will write around 300 words of why you want to go to this school. Your application will stand out if you can pinpoint specific aspects about what you like about this school. So this is why we're doing this specific webinar and also a section on exploring colleges specifically. So before we go on to exploring an actual college, we want to let you know some websites we recommend when you're exploring colleges. First of all, for college ranking, you can check out US News and Niche. Both websites offer general university ranking as well as specific rankings for programs and majors, as well as college dorms and college food. There are other websites involved, but those two are just something that was really helpful for me. Number 2 is basic facts. I would also recommend US News and Naviance. You probably used Naviance before. These two websites give you an overview of the university if you want to do quick research. The third thing is common data set. We explained previously, it's a really detailed list of information. We recommend you to look at it after you're kind of committed to apply to the school to find out about their stats and what admission officers are looking for in your application. Finally, we also recommend you to ask a student who's attending this university about their experience on campus. If you know a student who's currently going there, please feel free to ask them. We provided a guide of questions that you might want to ask in order to get to know about their campus. If you don't, that's okay. You can look at YouTube. Many YouTubers blog about their college life. And you can also check out Unigo, which is another website where students can answer many questions about their university. And finally, I just want to say, do not limit yourself to only these websites. If you know something else that is really helpful to you, feel free to use it. Now we'll be moving on to actually exploring a university. On the survey that everyone filled out, the popular vote is UCLA. So I will be kind of going over the UCLA website and some of the other websites I'll be looking at for exploring this university. Feel free to tell me if I'm going by too fast, but for now, it'll be nice if you can pull up your scavenger hunt spreadsheet and write down some of the factors that you like about the university while I'm exploring right now. Okay. So first of all, I would definitely recommend you to look at the UCLA virtual tour since you can't visit a college right now. And mostly colleges provide through UVisit right here. It asks you to fill out some information, but because I opened it before, it doesn't ask me. It's always good to do a virtual tour so that colleges know you're interested in the school and that you've virtually visited them, especially during these times. And then now we will be looking at the UCLA website. This is UCLA's website. It's a very intro page. Usually when I do research, I would search specific aspects about UCLA, but for purpose of the webinar, I will just look at UCLA through this website. The first thing you might want to look at is just look through the intro page and see what UCLA is currently doing and some of the research that they're involved in. Next, we will be looking at the academic. So on this opening page, you can see a ton of stats. UCLA is a really big research institution with tons of courses, majors, and departments catering to students' individual interests. And you can also see that their faculty involves Nobel Prize winners, Fulbright scholars. So a really bright and professional faculty members. Okay. So now we will be looking at the undergraduate education specifically. On this website, you can find out about the majors and minors if you want to look directly into that. And when I'm doing research on a college, I would definitely compare the majors and minors they offer for specific interests I have between different schools. For example, I'm interested in environmental and civil engineering. Many schools offer that major, but Stanford specifically offers energy resource engineering, which is something that I'm super interested in. That's something that stands out to me about Stanford than any other schools. You can check out their College of Letter and Science, as well as their individual divisions in social science, humanities, and the sciences. They also have the School of Arts and Architecture, as well as the Engineering School. While UCLA is strong academically, I would definitely suggest you to look at their music school if you're interested in becoming a music major. And if you're doing that, make sure you look at the professor that you will be studying under for a specific instrument, since you will be studying under him or her for 4 years. So it's good to look at their biography and what they have done. Yeah, so now let's look at a specific major. The major we'll be looking at today is psychology because it's a really good program at UCLA. And for that, I know that's definitely going to be in the College of Letters and Science. So this is their website. You can explore it more on your own time. Departments and programs. So this is their psychology website. For me, when I'm looking at this, I would first go look at their undergrads offering. And specifically, I can find out about the courses that I have to take by clicking on these links under majors and minors. But for now, I won't go specifically into them. I would also look at maybe some of the student organizations specifically in psychology if that's interesting to you. And you can click on these links. And then finally, we can also look at some of the research that they are involved in, which is here. And you can click on them to see what kind of interesting research that they're doing. Along with that, you can also check out their faculty list, where you can see some of the research papers that professors have published. And if there's a specific subject that you're really interested in, you can definitely look into that and jot them down in your spreadsheet and highlight them so that you know when you are finished researching that this is what stands out to me for UCLA. And finally, I just want to emphasize about the centers and programs page. Here, there are definitely, there's like a ton of centers, but make sure that you also check out their mental health programs and other support services revolving around careers or disabilities, because you will be spending 4 years again at this university. So you want to make sure that they offer a ton of support if you need any help. And while it's important to academically succeed on a campus, it's definitely like very important to keep up your mental health as well. So that's for majors and academic wise. Okay, and now let's look into perhaps some of the study abroad programs that they have. Here, I just searched up UCLA study abroad. Clicking on this link, I can find how you can apply to them, but that's not important because we're not UCLA students right now, except for George. So let's look at the programs that they offer. So you can check out like the cities that they're exploring and they're involved in if you're interested in studying abroad. And in addition to study abroad, I'm pretty sure they have work abroad too. So if that's interesting to you, check it out. So now we're done with academic wise, and I will be looking at campus life right now. Okay. For campus life, there's clubs and organization and recreation. That's something I want to look at. And while we're looking at this, I also want to emphasize on the importance of fraternities and sororities on campus. Some people prefer them, some people don't. So you might want to ask a student about how active these programs are at a specific university. And I also want to elaborate that fraternities and sororities also involved career-centered, like medical-wise programs. So if that's something interesting to you, you can also explore. But for now, we can see that UCLA has almost 1,000 clubs. That's a lot because most private schools that are smaller in size only have around, say, 500 clubs max. And here you can search up all the categories. If we want to look at community service, for example, you can check out the programs that they're involved in. And if you're interested in a specific sports, like if Brandon doesn't offer like taiko or something like that, you can also search if the university has that if you're super interested in it. We won't be looking at it during this webinar, but something else I might look into is dorm life and finding out whether you can have 4-year housing at UCLA. Probably not, I think you only have 2, right? Yeah, okay. So something else that's interesting to me is they have a specific page on community service for UCLA surrounding their community. Check it out later. I won't have time for now. Okay, so that's it on exploring UCLA. Something else I want to look into is your financial aid. And I will just search it up because it's easier and faster to look at. Okay, as for prospective students, you can check out the overview for some quick stats. Most importantly, I want to check out the cost of attendance right here. I would look at this page, but I would also keep in mind that there's also additional cost to this. So just keep in mind that the total cost listed on their website is often going to be less than how much you would actually have to pay if you go to this university. And finally, the most important thing to do is a net price calculator. So if you want to find out how much financial aid you can receive from a university, just click on a calculator and put in some of the basic information, ask your parents about it, and you can find out approximately how much aid you will be getting from this university. That's a basic overview for UCLA. It's a very quick tour, so feel free to look more into it when you're at home. I mean, you're at home, like when you have free time. Okay. The next thing we're going to be looking at, I just want to quickly show you, is US News. So this is the UCLA page. There's some very quick info on this website. So if you feel like exploring their website is going to take you too long, then you can look at US News if you want a quick overview of the university. And then I also want to highlight Unigo, which is a website to review students' opinion about the school. So here I basically searched up Unigo on the website, and now I searched up UCLA. Ooh, UCLA is top rated, that's good. So on the review section, you can find like questions that students have. Like, for example, describe the students at your school. This can be a question important to people who want to find out the general vibe of the school. So if you want to look into it, go for it. Okay, and then finally, the last thing before I leave off of this section is the common data set. I don't know why people are laughing, okay? So common data set is basically what I said before. It's a really detailed list. You can just search up this university name and common data set. And here, I just want to show you, while they have general information on what kind of institution they are, they also have stats on admittance and ethnicity-wise, but I wouldn't take note too much of into it. Like, if you're gonna want to go to the school, just go for it. And then most importantly, they have a section on basis for selection. So as you can see, their rigor for secondary school records is very important. However, they consider something like first generation less. So if you're a first generational student, you definitely don't have anything against you for applying to UCLA. This is something you can look at to find out more about your school. And that's it on my topic. And then lastly, I want to address, I know that this process is very daunting, like it's very time consuming, but honestly, when I did college exploration, I was really excited about everything I saw. I was very surprised in a good way about what each school is doing worldwide. And this made me want to go to the school more. So feel free to explore all you want, and it doesn't matter what grade you're in. It's always good to explore early on and have fun. Any questions?
Oh, by the way, I was adding, previously you said that UCLA guarantees 2 years of housing. Technically it's 3. Uh, During coronavirus, it's not very like set. Like you don't know if you'll get priority housing if you're a freshman. But different UCs differ differently. Like Berkeley guarantees 1 year of housing. So yeah, definitely read into it if that's important to you, if you want to live near or close to campus.
Okay, I guess no questions then. We'll be moving on. And I will stop sharing. George, did you want to share?
Yeah, perfect. And I'll present. So, when you are actually going to begin selecting colleges, it's important to distinguish your dream schools, or they're also called the reach schools, target schools, and safety schools. And these are kind of 3 tiers that you can group colleges into based on personal statistics. So a dream school or a reach school is a school that might be like a dream for you or an idealization. You don't know necessarily if you're going to get into it because it's more competitive. Admissions are a lot lower than normal. And the SAT range for it, the grade range for it, and the extracurricular range for it might be a little bit higher than the one that you're in. Target schools are the schools that you fit into. When looking at your GPA range, your SAT range, and your extracurricular range, this is like where you fall into. Like, let's say you have a 1400 SAT score, and like UC Irvine accepts students, normally accepted students have a range of like 1300 to 1500. That could be a sort of target school for you. And so that's kind of like what these colleges are categorized by and what we would like to emphasize, that you can look at your SAT score, your GPA, your extracurricular list, and based on that information, decide which school fits you best. And safety schools are schools that fall a little bit below in terms of competitiveness based on your record. And so those are sort of your safeties, and they're called your safeties because in case you don't get into other schools, those are your fallbacks. And it doesn't mean that they're bad schools. Like there are still really competitive programs within safety schools, and safety schools are always great. It's just important to have backups just in case anything happens. And it's really important then to prioritize target schools, schools that really fit your fit what you want to pursue, and then have a few dream schools and a few safety schools added next to them. And this really depends, again, like how many schools you're applying to. Please apply to, like, if you're going to apply to a lot of dream schools, also have like a nice safety net of safety schools and a nice safety net of target schools that you're also applying to. That said, if you are interested in a school and you're not sure if you want to apply to it because it might like seem too competitive, but you have the time for it, go for it, because I think you'll regret a lot more not applying to the school and never knowing if you could have gotten in or not than applying to it and knowing at least like, oh, the school wasn't right for me. So we also understand that with this coronavirus pandemic, it's a lot harder because a lot of schools are now switching to pass no pass for grades, and you might not be taking the SAT. But for example, extracurricular range is still really important. What you do at school, what AP classes you're taking are still very important. And I'll articulate this with a website that I'm going to explore now called CollegeVine. And CollegeVine is basically a website that calculates your chance for getting into a certain school based on these factors that we just talked about, SAT, grades, and extracurriculars in particular. So I'm going to exit real quick. And sorry. Oh, there it is. Okay, pretend you didn't see that. So here we're looking at a student with a 4.0 unweighted GPA, and we're comparing them to typical UCLA students. So a typical accepted student at UCLA would have a 3.87 approximately GPA. In terms of coursework, they took 6 APs and 2 honors classes, and they got 4s and 5s in their APs. And they have a solid 1500, which is higher than the typical accepted student background. However, when we look at their extracurriculars, they haven't entered any extracurriculars. And let's say the student didn't do any extracurriculars during high school. And although they have this amazing profile, their acceptance rate would be around 27 to 35%. And this is also saying that they took an SA2 test. And now we're going to see what happens when we update these extracurriculars. So this exercise really emphasizes how important extracurriculars are for your profile. And I'd also like to emphasize that the type of extracurriculars you're getting involved in are also important. Here they are. So there's a difference between, let's say you did a community service group, and here there are different tiers. So if you invest a little bit of time into like one extracurricular and you're not really passionate about it, then that will be sort of reflected by its tier. The more time and the more passionate you are about a certain activity, the more likely the farther you'll get into it, and the better it will look on your resume. The more value it will have to you, and you could also write about it in your college essays. So let's say this kind of goes up from like, I have less than 30 volunteer hours, raising money, and like how big the service event was. And let's say this is called the Spare, and this is a tier E club. We're gonna add another thing. Let's say we were involved in music at school too. Okay, and we're gonna call this Wind Ensemble. And we're gonna add approximately 5 activities. This is NHS. Let's add a hobby. And finally, let's add another community service activity. Let's make it tier F. So because we spent more time on the other activity, we had a little bit less time to spend on this activity. Let's save and see results. And there, our admission rate doubled practically just because we added 5 extracurriculars, and this is probably something you're already doing. And so this is also just shows the importance of being involved in different extracurriculars, but also kind of simplifies your chances. Like 50 to 59% is really good in comparison to UCLA's typical admission rate of 10 to 15%. So this is also like showing you what you should really emphasize when you're writing up your college apps. And then when we look at other schools that are maybe like varyingly competitive, like you now have an almost guaranteed chance to get into Cal Poly. Same with Chapman, a really good chance to get into UC Irvine. Still a hard chance to get into Duke, but that's because that's also a lot more that's a lot more competitive of a school. Okay, and it's really important also to acknowledge that just because one website says one thing, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to be able to get into that school. This website in particular places a lot of emphasis on SA2 subject test scores, but honestly, they're not that important if you're applying to a public school. So there's also websites like Unigo that can be a lot more important. And now we're also going to explore a website called College Search on Big Future College Board. And this basically just helps you match up to different schools. So let's say you want to go to a public. Let's change this. You want to go to Arts and Humanities. And I don't care. You must want for that school to have an Arts and Humanities program. And you want for at least 20% of financial need to be met. And you also want campus services. You save selections. This might take a little bit to load. Okay, and then there are 317 results. And you can look through these schools. You can sort them by alphabetical, their size, their applicants submitted. This will sort them in terms of how difficult they are. UCLA, Berkeley, Georgia Tech. And you can just look through these schools. You can edit these based on location, campus and housing, sports and activities, academic credit. You can do a lot of these different things. And College Board will just show you the list of varying schools that you can enter. There's also similar website. Sorry, I keep on trying to exit and then stop sharing. There's a similar website called Unigo that also, like Jamian said, shows student feedback on different universities, but also shows scholarships and how likely you are to get scholarships, and also matches you with different scholarships. And so you can also use that, and you can also use it because there's also a college match feature if you would like to. And previously we talked about a little bit about common data set, and I'd like to reemphasize that that's a really good resource if you're looking at per year what qualities got a particular student into a different school. And it does give ethnicity statistics, but please do not pay too much attention to those statistics. Those are very fluid over time. And just because you're a certain ethnicity doesn't mean you will get into a school or you won't. There's been a lot of talk recently about affirmative action and what that means for white and Asian students. But just because you're white or Asian does not mean you're not going to get into a competitive school. It doesn't mean that someone's going to take your spot or anything like that. The college admissions process is just becoming more equitable, and less emphasis is being placed on services such as SAT that are heavily influenced by socioeconomic status. And what I mean by that is that the richer you are, the more likely you are to do well on SAT. And the system is beginning to acknowledge that and make up for it in terms of essays and grades and various experiences. Thank you. Oh, and a final point, like Jamin also referenced before, if you know an alumnus that got into a certain school and you know their background and what kind of schools they got into and like what kind of grades they had, and you have a similar background to them, you can trust that you probably will get into those same schools, and you can compare yourself to based on that. Obviously, this isn't perfect, and none of the resources we shared with you are perfect, but the more resources you explore and the more you engage in this process, the likelier it is to be true. So definitely have that in mind when you're applying. Thank you. Any questions?
There is one question about how do recommendation letters factor in?
Recommendation letters only factor in for private universities, and they're definitely a factor. I would place less emphasis on them though. Those are very niche. Those are definitely have a lot more impact if you're applying, let's say, for a specific program within a university. Like UCLA has a great music program, so you want really good music recommendation letters. If you're applying to like this really competitive electrical engineering program at Berkeley, you might want recommendation letters for those. Those are very niche. Those are very common for private universities, and they have more weight and leverage based on who you get them from and if it's for a competitive program. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But if you are worried about recommendation letters, talk to the people who you trust, authority figures or teachers that you have a bond with already before you ask them for a recommendation letter, because if you are getting a recommendation letter, you want it to be worth it and you want it to show you in the best light.
Yeah, and then for students who aren't seniors, definitely make sure to build these relationships with teachers that you really like, so then they can have something meaningful to say about you in your recommendation letters. Are there any other questions? No? Okay, do you want to go into the next section then?
Yeah,
Do you want me to share screen again? Sorry.
sure.
Okay. And now we're going to be getting into our story.
Should I start or?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so for me personally, I really wanted to experience a new environment in college. Unlike a lot of random students choose to stay in California, but I love the East Coast, and so I applied to safety schools in California, but then I applied to all my dream schools on the East Coast. And I was rejected from my top 2 schools, which was sad. But then I got accepted into Tufts and Georgetown, which was super exciting. And initially I was leaning towards Tufts because the student body seemed more diverse and open-minded. But then when I started to reflect on myself and research more about Georgetown, I realized that I started to fall in love with the school. First of all, it's located in our nation's capital, DC. And as a person who wants to shape public policy someday, I love the idea of being able to protest at the White House and get involved in or intern at different advocacy groups and international organizations like the World Bank, and attend lectures by world leaders and diplomats that happen to be passing through. Also, I loved that Georgetown really emphasized community service and activism. My life purpose is to make the world a better place. And I was really excited when Georgetown's core value of people for others aligned with my own life purpose. Georgetown doesn't want its students to only be smart and successful, but it also wants its students to become compassionate human beings that are going to set up networks of compassion throughout the world, which is amazing. And it's not just a core value. The university really incorporates it into lots of different aspects of this school. There are a lot of classes that are designed specifically to inspire us to make a difference. For example, I took a Physics for Future Leaders course where we learned about physics, and then we also applied that to major world issues like climate change. So that was amazing. There's also an abundance of student organizations and programs on campus related to community service. For my pre-orientation program, I was involved in this thing called First Year Orientation for Community Involvement. So before I even started my freshman year, I learned about lots of different advocacy groups in DC and befriended 50 other freshman activists. I was also on a living learning community called Justice and Diversity in Action, and every single person on my floor was an activist and a person of color. And so I met a lot of people through that. And also we have a Center for Social Justice with hundreds of different community service organizations. So even though I realized that I might not fit the general demographic because Georgetown is generally pretty conservative, rich, preppy, that sort of vibe, but I was able to find friends in a community on campus regardless of the demographics. And I definitely have. I love Georgetown. I love all the friendships and memories that I've made so far. And so in summary, I'm so excited for you all to experience college. It's the best. I love it. And I really hope that with the factors and techniques that we talked about in this webinar, you'll be able to find your perfect college too.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. My journey sort of settled into a decision between 3 different colleges. So I ended the year looking at either UCLA, Berkeley, or UChicago. And for me, one of the first big decisions was valuing like a dream school versus a reasonable decision, because UCLA and Berkeley were a lot more affordable for me versus UChicago is definitely a great school, but its tuition plus housing amounted to almost $70,000, and that was just unreasonable for me. I didn't want to spend like each year. Sorry, I don't mean to call you out, Lauren. I didn't want to spend like each year paying that much money because, like, personally for me, I wasn't in a position to do that. And also, when I was learning more about UChicago, I heard a lot about how like it was definitely a business-focused school and a sort of cold, emotional environment. And I'm sort of like definitely a very social person, and I definitely need an environment where I can engage with the community and enter a lot of advocacy. So that kind of settled the decision between Berkeley and UCLA. And from that, in a similar sort of social environment, I visited both UCLA and Berkeley, and you can still do virtual tours even now, and you can get a lot of information from those. But it was clear to me that LA definitely had a sort of warmer and more engaging environment that also talked a lot about anti-racism and POC culture and queer culture and LGBTQ advocacy, which was really important to me. I wanted to get involved in a lot of different community service groups and a lot of different discussions, and wanted to learn about different kinds of people and more about my ethnicity and my history and my heritage. So it definitely, UCLA brought that to me as a place where I can engage with so many different students of so many different kinds of backgrounds. And there's just so many different schools and niches and communities on campus that I'm just really happy that I'm able to engage and learn from them and share my own story and combat rape culture and sort of learn and teach my friends and have these open discussion spaces where I don't have to be worried about like what people think of me or of who I am, and where you can definitely find acceptance no matter who you are. and grow with the people that you love. And the last thing that really appealed to me in the UC program, I originally applied as a neuroscience major, but I was also interested in astrophysics. So when I first talked to my department head about double majoring in astrophysics and neuroscience, they laughed and thought it was like completely unreasonable because double majoring in two STEM majors that are not related to each other at all will take up a lot of time. But the UC system has this great program. If you're interested, it's definitely competitive and you have to do a lot of work, but it's called the Design Your Own Major program, where basically you create your own, well, you literally create your own major, you choose your own classes, and you submit this sort of 30-page proposal at the end of your sophomore year, and your major might be approved or denied. And I decided to create the astrobiology major, which really appeals to me in sort of exploring the origin of life and the evolution of macromolecules into the RNA world. Look into it if you're interested too. But something that also amazed me was that I found another person who was also creating their major and who was also doing astrobiology. So yeah, I think like no matter how unique you are, this is also very telling that there's definitely someone out there like you. And if you are looking for that kind of sort of like self-discovery journey, a large university might be good for you because you're a lot more likely to find people like you, a lot more likely to find a lot of empathy and a lot of compassion. And don't restrict yourself. Definitely look into different decisions, but there's definitely a place for you. Don't be afraid of not finding that sort of place. You will find your community in college.
And lastly, so the two schools I was picking from were Stanford and MIT, and I'm really lucky to be making that decision. And if you were here from the last webinar, you probably heard that MIT was my dream school. And having this dream definitely encouraged me to be more confident in exploring the STEM fields. And during this process, I realized that this college selection process, I realized that the school that fits you can be different from your dream school. So MIT was my dream because I dreamed of being a STEM genius and conquering tough calculus questions. But while the two schools are very strong academically for STEM, it is also strong in the humanities. So both schools have really good academic programs that I look up to. However, I felt that I fit in more at Stanford because I was more of a well-rounded person rather than a STEM genius. And so it is often said that Stanford's culture is very diverse and that your Stanford is different from the person next to you. And I was more certain that its flexibility and culture of exploration can help me grow more. And in addition, I wanted to talk about student diversity. So while MIT students do have a passion in the humanities, most students go to this school for a STEM curriculum. However, at Stanford, I can meet people with much diverse backgrounds and interests. This to me was more important because I want my college experience to challenge my beliefs, just like how Lauren thought that Georgetown would challenge her beliefs more than Tufts. So Stanford was the right decision for me personally, and even though it was hard to make, I still believe that I would choose a school that fits me rather than my dream. So here are 3 examples of how we made our college decisions. Those factors might be what you look into when you're exploring your own college and making your own decisions later on in March. George, flip the slide.
You're on mute.
Muted.
Sorry. I was trying to fix this. So once again, we operate in partnership with Bruin to Bruin Tutoring. You can visit them at bruin2bruin.weebly.com and follow them at Instagram, B2Branham. They have a lot of really useful information and articles that can also help you with both your college journey and if you're entering high school and you're acclimating and you're thinking about entering different AP classes, especially challenging ones. So please visit them, follow them on Instagram, and you can get involved with them during the fall if you're looking to either participate or also like to get help.
And then our next webinar will be held 2 weeks from today, actually 2 weeks and less than a day before. It's Wednesday, July 22nd from 4 to 5. We sent out the RSVP link on the chat. Basically, we're going to be over SAT and ACT tips and tricks. We know that many of you have questions about the testing process, so we'll be making this webinar in 2 weeks. And if you're interested, feel free to sign up.
And then we're also doing the, oh shoot, I put the wrong date. Oops. But yeah, we're doing the Pass It On project. We're collecting SAT, ACT, and AP prep books, and we're going to redistribute them to low-income Branham students. So if you have extra of any of those type of books, stop by the Branham U-shaped parking lot, which is where the main office is. It's like the new parking lot, on Wednesday, July 15th from 5 to 6. And we'll be there collecting prep books in a very COVID safe way.
Please remember to wear masks.
Yeah.
And yes, we would want PSAT prep books too. Thank
Just
you so
bring
much.
along your alum friends if you have any.
And thank you for coming today. If you want to sign up for services, make sure you check out the link below. And if you want to give us feedback about what we talked about, some suggestions, and maybe if you have any questions, and to sign up for services, please fill out this link. I will send it on the chat. But for now, we will be going over any Q&A. So if you have any more questions, feel free to type them below, and we will be on for another 5 minutes about them.
Oh, I missed one question in the chat. They wanted us to reiterate our majors. So I'm majoring in astrobiology.
I'm double majoring in Justice and Peace Studies and Women and Gender Studies.
And I'm undeclared.
Any other questions?
You can probably stop sharing screen.
And I will stop recording now.